Welcome everyone and good afternoon. For those of you who don't know and anyone who's watching, I'm Councillor Kimberly Barrett. I'm the Cabinet Member for Climate Change and the Green Recovery. Just a few housekeeping rules before we start. Please be reassured that we put the appropriate cleansing and social distancing measures in place just to ensure that this meeting is undertaken in a COVID secure manner. Limited public seating has been made available. However, this meeting is also being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they wish. Public seating area is not in view of the camera, but I don't think we've got anyone today anyway. Can I please ask members and officers to remain seated throughout the duration of the meeting and to wear a face covering unless seated. General housekeeping information: if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please do evacuate the room and the public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts and assemble by the Queen Victoria statue in the Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who's signed in the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Everyone speaking will be via a microphone will be on camera, and there's no deputations today, I believe. No, okay. Members of the public and press are permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone use the microphones, or remember to switch them off when you've finished, otherwise the camera will stay just on you. We've read all the reports, so if officers could highlight any developments that have occurred since publication, that would be absolutely fantastic. So I will do introductions now around the room, so I'll start off with Jane, if that's okay.
I'm Jane Didino, the Local Democracy Officer.
And I'm Kelly Nash from the Strategy Unit.
Sorry, Charlotte. No, ladies first.
Sorry, Councillor Charlotte Gerardo for Central Southsea.
I'm Councillor Robert Lee for Copner Ward.
Jacob Shaw, I'm shadowing Councillor Gerardo for the day.
Bethan Mose, Public Health Principal for Public Health.
Fantastic, thank you everyone. Just to check, are there any apologies for absence today at all?
I haven't received any, Chair.
Okay, declarations of any interest with anybody at all? No? Good, okay. So we will jump straight on then to the greening strategy report. So I will hand over to Bethan then, thank you.
Thank you. So it's a very brief report, which is to make the Cabinet Member aware of two pieces of information that we need to consider moving forwards. Just by way of background, the Green in Portsmouth strategy was approved by Cabinet in March 2020, and it supports a range of multidisciplinary programmes across the whole of the City Council, including the Climate Change Action Plan, Clean Air Zone, Air Quality Strategy, Local Transport Plan, and the Portsmouth Health and Wellbeing Strategy. The aim of the greening strategy is to increase the amount of green infrastructure, tree canopy cover and planting opportunities across the whole of the city, recognising the clear links between good health and wellbeing and greening. Since that strategy was adopted, resource was allocated to focus the delivery of the strategy, and this was funded through Public Health Transformation Fund. And this time last year, we recruited and appointed a new Green and Healthy City coordinator who is doing a grand job of bringing in external funding opportunities and liaising between services delivering the greening agenda and having that strategic oversight. The role sits in public health and it aligns strongly with health and wellbeing priorities, particularly health inequalities. One of the issues which is going to come to the fore quite quickly is the Public Health Transformation Fund is a limited pot of funding. Once it's been spent, there is no more. And the role of the Healthy Cities Coordinator, Green and Healthy Cities Coordinator, is therefore fixed term and time limited. So some consideration needs to be given to how this role continues, because it's an important role and it does a really good job at coordinating a very big agenda across the city. Another area of work which we're now turning to look towards is the greening strategy itself. It's coming up to its 2-year anniversary, and there have been a number of changes in national and local policy since it was adopted in March 2020. Not least the Environment Act was adopted at the end of last year, and there are emerging provisions coming out of that, and they're summarised in Appendix B of the paper. The other notable change in local policy, or development rather, is the Portsmouth Local Plan, which set out in its autumn 2021 consultation for Regulation 18 a clear policy direction for greening and health. So we're looking to undertake a strategy refresh, if you like, of the greening strategy to align itself with these policy developments, including the Portsmouth Health and Wellbeing Strategy, which is also being refreshed as we speak, and looking to broaden it more with other areas linked into the agenda, so the climate agenda, for example, the biodiversity scrutiny, and so on. That piece of work can be undertaken, and one of the questions here is to seek approval that you're happy for us to undertake that, with the caveat that longer term, the resource that is currently available to do that work will not be there, and the greening agenda is very much a long-term agenda. So it's really to make you aware of the fact that this is an issue, and any steer you are able to give us would be most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bethan, for the report. It was really interesting reading, and I completely agree with everything you've said. This is such a big project that we need to be doing, and it's not just a single project in here, it's multiple projects across the city and across all the different departments as well, whether it's public health, culture and leisure, also housing. It affects quite a few things, and I'm really keen that we carry on doing this work, carry on refreshing, making sure that we're aligning with the Environmental Act 2021, Portsmouth Plan, and the Health and Wellbeing report that's coming forward as well. And some of the things that you've put in here as well about the updating the tree charter, especially with the tree cover that we've got across the city, you know, I think it's really important that we're focusing on making people aware and pushing that forward as well. I hope Zoe doesn't mind me mentioning her name, but she's been doing some absolutely fantastic work. She's managed to get some really decent funding for us to be able to do these projects. So I'm keen to be able to find the budget to continue on that role. I've asked officers to look into it. Unfortunately, it's just come just after we've already submitted the budget for full council next week. But I'm quite keen on getting that sorted and pushing that forward and bringing that back so you can all see that as well. But for peace of mind as well, if Zoe's continuing doing that job or whoever it is, I think we really need to make sure that there's, you know, job security there, and we're continuing it on rather than just year by year. We're looking at permanent funding. So thank you so much for bringing that forward. I don't know if anyone's got any questions at all. Charlotte.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I completely agree with you, Kimberly. We should absolutely make that a permanent position if we can. You did briefly mention that in the text committee, so the Transport, Environment, Community Safety Scrutiny Panel, which is a mouthful, we've been reviewing enhancing biodiversity across the city and looking at all of the different policies and practices and taking evidence from literally the world and his wife, which has been amazing. And we are now concluding, and we're about to pull together everything we found in a report. So yeah, it would just be great if the recommendations from that could feed into this, basically, if possible.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think we've had a discussion about that, and I did mention it when I spoke at the panel, and we've spoken about it as well, and we're quite keen to pull all the information, but also work alongside the scrutiny panel to make sure that all that information is put in. It's only going to strengthen anything that we do, so thank you to the panel as well. I know they've been working on this for well over a month as well, and talking to anybody and everybody who's been interested, so if I could pass on thanks to them as well, and to yourself, that's brilliant. Rob?
Thank you, Chair. So kind of following on from that as well, I completely agree with Councillor Gerarda. I think that if the administration's serious about these strategies and implementation, we have to look to provide the funding for the posts and possibly some additional money as well, because actually I think that the work is much more expansive. And really my question, it also... It's not just for the greening strategy, but it also moves over into the decarbonisation project and aspirations of the council as well. Since we had our briefing meeting, I've been really lucky to go and visit one of our neighbouring councils who are working on a Diamond Jubilee seagrass meadow, and also there are some that are being started on the Isle of Wight as well, and also down in the West Country. And just for the benefit of the public, it's kind of hailed as like a wonder kind of plant in terms of the amount of carbon that it captures, around 35% more than what trees and grass currently capture. And as we are an island city, I thought at the moment it's probably one of the areas where, because there is just so much going on that we probably haven't looked or given due attention to, and I think it's probably only started to come on our radar in terms of being in the public conscience sort of thing. But I thought that was quite an exciting opportunity, especially with our work with the Langstone Harbour Board, and if it would be possible perhaps to build into the greening strategy. I appreciate it would be a future project to look at where may be appropriate, either around Langstone Harbour, in the Solent, etc., being mindful of the military constraints, the current kind of environmental constraints and who has what. If we actually perhaps started to look at or identify even where may be appropriate to look at a project around that, also as well what the cost might be, because I'm sure that anything that's underwater is going to be more expensive than planting trees per se, and also being able to get the specimens and the species to be able to plant. But it seems to be quite a popular thing that people are actually starting to start and say, actually we do need to start to look to re-green our coastal waters, and I think as a coastal city there could be some great opportunities to build into this project there, and perhaps, who knows, maybe there are funding tranches for this as well, because DEFRA seem to love a bandwagon, shall we say.
Completely agree with you there. I know when I last spoke to the university, they are looking at doing a couple of projects, so I think that's, hopefully I'll catch up with them soon anyway, but I think what you've said, it's a really good opportunity. It's funny enough that you said that actually, because I was looking at an article about seagrass last night and thinking, oh, that would be quite a good idea. So I think it's worth investigating. If we can do something, I think we should do it, because we do focus a lot on the land, but, you know, as you said, we're an island city, we are surrounded by water, and we've also got everything happening with the sewage discharge into Langstone Harbour that we, you know, which is awful anyway, so we really need to be looking at what we can to make sure that those environments are, you know, just as, you know, safe, built up as we are looking on land. So very happy to take that on board, take that back, speak to officers, and then get back to you in our next briefing and see what we can do and see if there is any funding as well. But yeah, I think it's worth having a chat with the university as well to see what their projects are, because they are doing quite a bit around the city, and they're also, I'll talk to Councillor Hugh Mason as well with the sea defence work as well, because they're looking at doing a lot of projects around that as well that are coming up. So perhaps that's something we could talk about in a future briefing and report back to the public as well. But no, really good idea, so thank you. And did you? Yeah.
Feels weird talking here. Just bouncing off of what Councillor New said about the seagrass, a lot of secondary schools and colleges, as well as universities, like you said, have like aquarium clubs, I guess you could say, and I think to have a lot more community involvement on something so green, it would be good to work with those schools, colleges, universities to have some more projects, and also when it comes to boards like TCAT for Milton Cross, for example, them clubs get their own fundings as well. So if it's any sort of funding issues, if you were to work with those groups at the education areas, then funding won't be so much of an issue because they get their own funding as well.
I'm always more than happy to include the community, schools, education, anything like that, because, you know, especially regardless of what stage of education you're at, these children and teenagers, they're going to be the ones that are carrying on from what we're doing, but what we're doing now is for them, for their grandchildren. So I'm always more than happy to go and talk to universities, schools, and try and get them involved. For an example, I know my son's school, they have an eco council, so I'm going to speak to them. I'm getting them involved in some eco projects in the city. I'm hopeful that, they'll be an example and other schools will do the same as well. They're a junior school, but I'm also now talking to an infant school elsewhere in the city as well to see if they will start something up. So that's one thing. In regards to funding, always happy to talk to them. Obviously, we have to have experts who look at that kind of thing, especially with the university, Portsmouth University. They've been doing absolutely fabulous work, not just here as well. They've been working with universities in America as well to do projects over there. So, Portsmouth University have been doing some fantastic work, and not just them, always willing to work with anybody else who's interested. So we'll definitely take that back and have a chat and think about it, and happy to speak to anybody who's interested. So. Perfect. Any other questions? Bethan?
Just a comment. The Green and Healthy City Officer has already got schools earmarked on her radar for a programme of works using some of the community kind of like grassroots approaches. We've worked with Crumbs. I can't actually remember the name of the group now. I can't remember the name of the group. It's one of the Portsmouth groups, very well known, in terms of bringing in a number of fruiting trees into the schools community, and that's been led by Nick Sibley in conjunction with Zoe. So, and what we'd like to do is a whole programme of schools, kind of like educational awareness around trees, around planting, vegetable, fruit and growing, anything really that's green. There's huge educational opportunities, so that's definitely on the radar. We just need the resource to do it.
Thanks very much for that, Bethan. If there's no other comments... Oh, Christina.
It's just a last bit about seagrass, which I could talk about all day. But the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust are about to start a big seagrass restoration project around our coastline. They're just recruiting volunteers right now, and I think they're having a sort of kick-off meeting tonight. So I can share something about that if you... Okay.
Funnily enough, I've got a meeting with Andy about part of that tomorrow and over the next few days. So happy to feed that back to everybody as well if you want to be involved. So I'll email everyone out about that. So other than that, we will move on to the next item, which is our carbon strategy refresh. So I'll pass over to Christina.
Back to me. Thank you very much. So this is the first of two reports that I'm presenting today. So the first of which is to provide a bit more information about what we're doing with the climate change strategy. So just a bit about the background to this is that it was last developed in 2020, and since then we have been updating it with in line with a couple of external reviews and sort of making it more in line with best practice. So as it currently stood, the city and the council climate change strategy were put together in one document, which is problematic for different sort of timelines and complexities and just sort of different reporting and engagement. So since then I have been developing a new structure and methodology which should help a bit more with sort of more timely publishing. So as it will sit, there'll be a sort of an overarching climate change strategy that'll sit above, and that shouldn't have to be updated very often. It will just sort of detail climate change in Portsmouth, what it means to us, the policies and laws that surround this, and underneath these two, this overarching strategy will sit a separate organisational inventory and action plan for the council and a separate one for the city. So each action plan will revise them annually now, and we think that's appropriate because we have a net zero target of 2030 and we are very rapidly running out of time. And each time we revise them, we'll update the inventory, which is a sort of a carbon accounting basically. It's just a sort of spreadsheet of numbers. And then we will update a sort of corresponding action plan to go with that of actions that we will be doing as the council or together with the Climate Action Board. So we are hoping that the new council organisational strategy will be published hopefully March this year, hopefully, and then we're working with the Climate Action Board to update the new city strategy, which will need a lot more engagement, but we're hoping that will also be ready for this year. We just want to note that some activity data might be missing from the organisational inventory for the council, because organisational inventories are extremely complicated, and getting the data and trying to quantify data is actually quite problematic, but we will work sort of iteratively to try and improve anything and any data gaps that we have. We also want to note that we want to begin work on a climate change adaptation strategy together with other groups in the council, and we believe, and we want to do that in a sort of similar fashion to how we'll be doing the carbon strategy work. And we think it's important to sort of assess the risks and the potential impacts here, not just to the council and council operations, but to the city, and then sort of put them together in a holistic and transparent way for the public to see.
Thank you for that, Christina. I don't think there's much more I can add to that, apart from saying thank you very much. For anyone who doesn't know, Christina's new to the job fairly recently, and she's been working so hard. And it's really great that we've, as a council, have someone who's specifically looking at climate change, the carbon audit, looking at anything like that. I think it's really important work that we need to do. We've promised people we will do this, and we are doing it, and we will carry on doing it as well. So I'm really pleased that we've got you, Christina, so thank you. I don't know if anyone's got any questions at all or comments. Charlotte?
Thank you, Chair. Just to pass on my huge and enormous thanks as well, because that just sounds amazing, and it's what we've all been sort of waiting for. So just thank you, and it's just great to have you here.
Anybody else at all? No? No, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Well, we will then move on back to Christina, back to the carbon budget methodology then.
All right, welcome back. Okay, so the second report and final report for me is we want to explain how we're sort of developing these carbon reduction targets or budgets going forward. So the context here is that both the council and the city have declared 2030 to be the net zero target, and that is going to require significant year-on-year reductions in carbon. So we can create these targets by sort of first estimating what carbon emissions will do in the future if we take no action, and this is basically called a business as usual scenario. So this is sort of things that will happen outside our control, sort of things that will happen with central government, with the grid decarbonisation, or changes in energy demand, or other things like ban on gas boilers, things like that. And that will be sort of the trajectory of emissions that will affect us, but have nothing really, we don't really play much part in that. So luckily, we're sort of decarbonising anyway without us having to do much. But then we need to do more to reach our 2030 target, and a lot more. So the way we can use this business as usual trajectory is that we test our actions against this, to say how much impact it will have against this. And we can start, if we design a mitigation measure, then we can quantify how much carbon will be reduced against this sort of business as usual. And then, but we don't just do it on carbon. There's much more important things just than carbon. There's cost, and there's sort of cost per carbon, which is you sort of how much bang for your buck are you going to get. But also, really, really importantly, is co-benefits. And that's really important in Portsmouth. And as our sort of national net zero strategy says, that any actions that a local authority takes in this arena needs to be on a place-based approach, which means we need to be designing our actions to address not just climate change, but other things that are important to our city as well. So what we might look at sort of anything to do with planting trees and things like that. We might also note the benefits to biodiversity or potential air quality or just sort of quality of life, and those are really important measures that we need to be capturing as well, and showing, we are showing cross-cutting thinking here as well, and that's really important. So that's really about it, I think. Yeah. So just one more thought in my mind. So in terms of sort of a budget, we can sort of dial in what our minimum targets will be once we have all these climate actions dialed in, and then we'll be able to say we can definitely meet these, but let's push us to do better. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll let Rob jump straight in.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose thank you so much for all you're doing. And I appreciate where you're new in post, you might not be able to answer this question fully. And I also, I suppose, in a similar way, have some sympathy for you as well, Chair, because of the way that the budget runs and the time of the year. But it is a significant piece of work. And in terms of looking at what budget allocations will be needed across the council, when do you envision that we might be in a place to be able to start looking at what they actually may be? Because I suppose one of the things that concerns me is, having been in administration before, is quite often departments do work in silos. It's often not even their fault or an agenda, it's just how things fall, where things are so busy, but you end up needing to take everybody on that journey with you, and there sometimes is kickback to it. But I do appreciate the points that you were saying, as you understand more and more things that are actually going to be required to hit the targets and the final date of 2030. That's my only question really, and concern. I'm sure that will be shared, but you might not even be able to answer that right now, to be honest, but I think there's something we need to be mindful of, because it's the only way it can work if we can get everything together, and I think it probably is going to be larger sums of money than perhaps we might first envision.
So I think there are two things there. So clearly, what Christina's described is not really a monetary budget, but you're absolutely right. The key thing we then need to do is take that into a space where we're saying, so what would be the costs of achieving the carbon budget? So I think how we're planning to use the tool sits alongside the strategy that's outlined of the first report, and really says, okay, if we want to almost reduce that glide, or speed up the glide path really to where we're getting to, which is the line that we'd be taking, what are the things that we would need to do? And what the tool would allow us to do is almost evaluate the relative impact of those actions and make clear recommendations around actually where we would want to put whichever resources are available to us, and what the impact of going further and faster on those things are. So I think you're absolutely right, it's too early to use that information to inform the process this year, but I think would absolutely be part of informing the administration's deliberations in future years, and it becomes one of those key pieces of information that we use to sort of assess what sorts of schemes should be coming forward, which need to be supported, and which would obviously have the maximum impact and value for money for residents. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Ward. It's a little bit early this year to use that for evaluating. It'll certainly become a key tool in future.
And I think we can all acknowledge that, with all the projects that we potentially want to do and need to do, it's going to cost significant amounts of money. I'm hopeful that there'll be more funding from government at some point, because I think obviously we've had funding from things like the Warmer Home grants, which is really important at the moment, especially with everything going on. But sort of further investment in greener projects, decarbonisation would be absolutely great, and I'm hoping something comes forward with that. But no, I agree with you, and my apologies, because it's not something I'm quite sure about, so thank you, Kelly, for answering that. But I think you're completely bang on with what you've said, and I think it's going to be an interesting year to see what we can then go on and do. Obviously, I hope I'm sat in this chair in a few months' time, but who knows, it might be you or somebody else. So, I'm just hoping that this work continues on. It's really important, and it's going to be very interesting seeing what comes forward from that. So, but thank you. That was really good, so thank you. Anybody else then?
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick question. You said about the councils and the city's year goal being 2030 for net zero. With any current projects and any ones that are already in the plan, do you believe that's a realistic target for us as a council and as a city?
That's a good question. For the council, obviously we have, so looking at us as an organisation, I believe we have a lot more control over the decisions we make, and we have many, many different roles in the city. Being a unitary authority, we have a lot more impact across the city. So I believe that our actions and choices can not only impact just council emissions, but also on city emissions as well. So I am very hopeful of the council level, but our influence over the city is limited. And sort of data shows to date that the most impact has actually been through central government. So we're really reliant on them coming on board. And obviously our 2030 goal is earlier than the national 2050 goal. So they might be lagging a little bit behind us. So we are really reliant on the help from the Climate Action Board. We're really reliant on the support from our residents and businesses. And that's something we're engaging with now. I mean, we're just going for all angles. So 2030 is up to everyone, but I mean, we're using every power we have to try and get us there.
Yeah, thank you.
I think it's important to add myself, Kelly, Christina, and a number of, I think, how many was it? 20 businesses?
Yeah, I think it was. It was about 20 people. I don't think they quite represented 20 organisations, but it was a good spread of organisations across the city, certainly, yeah.
We had almost like a climate board with the local businesses, the biggest employers across the city. I think I can say it went really positively. I think we as a council, we're doing everything we can, but if we can help other organisations, big employers across the city, start to bring down what they're doing and hit targets, then it's only going to benefit the residents of this city. So yeah, I am really pleased that we managed to organise that, and that I think everybody, or the majority of the businesses or the people who represented them, are keen to carry on working with us, and share information. Obviously you guys have seen the report that Andrew brought forward and the work that we've done alongside the naval base, which they've done the same. If that can be replicated across multiple businesses and big employers across the city, that's great. And then also if that can go down, and if smaller businesses as well can look at it, because I mean I talk to a lot of the traders down on Albert Road, and they are doing their own thing down there, which is absolutely fantastic. They're doing everything they can to reduce their carbon footprint. So if we can replicate that as well, but for smaller businesses, and we're all coming together to work across and do this, I think it's an absolutely excellent thing. And I so far haven't seen many councils working alongside all the organisations, so I'm really pleased that we are doing that. Hopefully we could be an example towards other councils as well who are doing the same sort of thing as us. But I think it's a really big, important step forward, and I think we discussed about bringing maybe a report back at some point soon, didn't we, so that we can update you with what's going on, get some feedback, and yeah, just go from there really. So yeah. Any questions? No? No, fab, okay. Well then we will move on to the last item then, which is notice of motion update on carbon emissions. I'll pass that to Kelly.
Yeah, that's my one, thank you. And probably more just a summary report really of a number of other things you've already heard about in this meeting and others, but really just formally summarises the administration's response to the notice of motion that was agreed in November's council meeting, that's right. So there are 4 key actions that were agreed as part of that. One is to identify and allocate necessary funding for a carbon audit, and the position of the authority that set out is that we will be using the Scatter Cities tool as the tool in which to get that independent advice around the emissions for the city, and obviously will be a baseline against which we'll be tracking things. Will be absolutely complemented by the work that Christina's already outlined around the strategy and the budget. Action 2 and 3 are wrapped together in this report simply because, again, they're very similar things in terms of the way that we're resolving those, and obviously the methodology has now been presented, and we'll be bringing forward the full programme of measurement in future. And the final one is obviously applying the information to provide the detailed action plan. Again, that's part of the work that Christina's outlined there. So really want to just bring this together to clearly show how it all fits with the actions that were agreed at council, and confirming that that notice of motion is being fully implemented. And happy to take any questions.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you so much for bringing that to the council anyway. I think it's really important that these kind of things are, out in the public domain, and, obviously now we've got the targets that Kelly's spoken about that we are working towards. Very important work, so thank you for bringing that forward. I don't know if you've got any questions or comments at all, or... No? No? Okay. Well, if that's the case, unless anyone's got anything else at all today, I think that's it, and I can let everyone go off and have a lovely afternoon then. So thank you so much everyone for coming, and we'll see you next month then. Thank you.